One. So today we touch on a very, very vulnerable and a difficult topic, which is the price of false hope when optimism becomes exploitation. And it's a very personal topic for the three of us, as I'm sure is for many expats in the diaspora and just anybody that is trying to better themselves and seek a better world or better circumstances and falls prey to those that are not necessarily working on the sunny side of the market. So I welcome Yusuf Scali, of course. He's guiding our conversation today, and one of the most compassionate and brilliant professionals, Sally Wagner, who really guides this segment of healing naturally every day. So welcome, Yusuf and Sally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Yusuf, you're very passionate about the manipulation of those vulnerable, just wanting a better life. Can you get us started, please?
Well, through my experience in life first as a human being, before being an expat in different countries and before starting my coaching practice, I came to realize that desperation is one of the most exploited and profitable currency in the world.
Mm, yeah.
And that led me really to think and now working especially on the emotional adaptability and the emotional awareness with my clients on really researching and observing how decisions are being made, especially in a moment of where our optimism is blurred. And that led me like really to realize that there is unfortunately a price of false hope or a manufactured hope that it's being used toward the most vulnerable people.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is vulnerability, by the way, is yes, to new Americans and new Canadians and people trying to achieve that North American dream, certainly comes to light quite,
Yeah,
quite vividly every day on the news. But there's vulnerability on every front. There's, elders, and not even elders, my goodness, like, Xers and boomers are becoming, prey through AI exploitation and through just fraudulent, activity. But what came to mind, you come from Europe, and there's a constant the haves and the have nots, right? It's almost like when you look at Haiti and the Dominican Republic, right? Like you literally can draw the line between who's thriving and who is just, in a desperate need. And it's the same, my coming from Latin America, that we get to see all the people being, you know, taken advantage of trying to cross a border into the United States, where Sally comes from, and she's our voice there. And, under false promises, perilous journeys, and, the realization that once you make it to the other side, it's not the dream is possible, but it's not a landing across of the rainbow. You know what I mean? It's not instant, it's
absolutely.
not automatic. Sally, you guys are the mecca destination for people all over the world, with the promise of a better life, with the promise of opportunity and safety, which is true. um, but it's not as simple as perhaps people are led to believe.
Right.
And it creates a upheaval for the existing citizens as
Yeah.
much as those that are vulnerable. Tell us your thoughts, from on this
Yeah.
topic?
So I feel like I'm kind of in a unique position. My husband is from Germany, and he grew up there and was an adult when he moved to the US.
Oh,
And his opportunities there were much fewer than what he experienced in the US. When he was a very young teenager, like 14 years old or maybe younger, he was put into an apprenticeship to be a mechanic, and that was going to be his future. And he was able to move himself to a different path. He became an RN in Germany, which
okay.
was extraordinary for him to be
Oh,
able to
wow.
change paths in that way, because it's a much more rigid system. When he came to the US, he became a chiropractor, and he totally
Really?
changed his life and his direction. So I think, just anecdotally and based on other things that I've read and observed here, there are lots more opportunities and there's lots more movement
Yes.
within professions, within, financial, economic classes. It's not as rigid as it is in other
The
places. And I think that's
mobility,
the draw.
yeah, the
Yeah.
mobility is the key. You
Mhm.
see, what people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize, is that, for example, in countries like Mexico, right, secondary education can be government sponsored. Like a lot of
Mhm.
times when you go on tours in Cancun, the person guiding the tour could be an archaeologist, like a
Yes.
PhD, right? And it's the same in Cuba, and it's the same in many places throughout the world, that the education does, in even where I come from in Latin America, like, you know, university is like high school, like a minimum standard, but that doesn't guarantee you mobility within the success circles or
Yeah.
within the wealth creation or generational, right? Generational prosperity is so difficult, that mobility. And
Right.
when natives of Canada and the US, what I have noticed is that they don't understand that. It's like, you know what, here, um, and again, I'm just telling you my personal experience, right? Somebody who is, say, a plumber, considered in the trades, right? Which in most countries around the world is your mobility is limited, right? But in Canada, you can be a plumber, you can start your own business, you can suddenly have your franchise, and you can be the neighbor of a CEO. Like, there's that is the dream, that anybody can go to university, that anybody can own a business, that anybody can move and live anywhere you want. In your class, your birthright and your education does not pigeonhole you, right? And so what brought up our topic today is that crisis, the humanitarian crisis occurring in Morocco and Spain. Because Yusuf, you guide us through your thoughts on that.
Well, that crisis of where more than 60,000 people flooded the borders between Morocco and Spain, or precisely Ceuta, or as we call it where I come from, Ceuta, which is a city on the mainland of Morocco geographically. So it's in Africa for people to understand. But the main thing, it's not. I have been watching a lot of videos and images coming from that, and it was heartbreaking to me. And while every analyst is looking at it from the political perspective or the economical perspective, I just took a step back, and it broke my heart to see those videos and images. And I'm looking at it from the emotional part and from the hope, because people that just left everything, people, they were in their work and they just left everything behind, and they went running. And to me, instead of asking like, oh, why this happened, I go a step back, like really, what they were looking for and what lead them to that, because most of the time when people become desperate enough, they
Mhm.
stop evaluating risk, because
Yeah.
that was a huge risk to just cross the borders without knowing where they're going. So people are really, that's what they're looking for. It's an escape, and thinking always that the grass is greener on the other side,
Mhm.
without even having that discernment, that judgment. And I was thinking, like, who is nurturing that or manufacturing that hope that the grass is greener? And it made me think, well, in that case, I see whoever is behind this, and most probably many, that hope is their product. It's hope is being treated as a commodity.
Yes.
And what is used is a kind of fear. And even if we come back to, and I'm sure Sally will have a lot to say on that, if we come to the natural healing, because to me, all it's the same. We are looking for an escape from something or for a solution that it's usually fueled by a kind of fear that we are trying to avoid, or a fear of missing out on something. But in both cases there is a fear, because fear of missing out on, this is my last chance, this is the one and only solution, this is the only way. And then that desperation, as I said earlier, become the market that is being exploited.
That's the
And this,
currency. That's the
that's
currency.
that's that's a currency. And I want just to make a caveat, because we have been talking in the first part about vulnerability. There is nothing wrong with being vulnerable. Vulnerability can be strength. The only risk is that when we are not self-aware enough, and we don't have the self-knowledge and the self-awareness to have to accompany our vulnerability with wiser decisions. And I'm sure Sally has a lot to say about that.
I absolutely agree. Vulnerability is a strength when you have all of those other strengths to support you in it, right? The wisdom, the knowledge, the determination. And yet, when we're vulnerable from a place of weakness, and we mentioned earlier, elderly, um, people who are at risk for other reasons, then they're in a position where other people can take advantage of them. When you're vulnerable from a position of strength, you're not going to be taken advantage of. And that's the tragedy, that
Yeah,
Ooh, I
there
like
are
that.
vulnerable people who are in a position of weakness, and then there are other people who are determined to take advantage of them.
yeah,
You can be strong and vulnerable. They're
absolutely.
not mutually exclusive,
Right.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
What caught me by surprise, because by the way, there's a huge amount of humanitarian crises going on around the world that it's not convenient for the media to, there's no profit in making people aware of it. Like Cuba's under a huge humanitarian crisis
yes,
right now, and it's all like for political gain, and it's just disgusting, right? And it's so quick to come to judgment, right? When I saw the particular incident with happening in Morocco, Spain, what what hit me the most is that they were all young men. There was almost 60,000. There were a few children, there were a few women, but the bulk of them were young men.
yeah,
Imagine all the mothers, and all the siblings, and all of the children, right? Like the impact, the
yeah,
collective mental health, and the collective impact to have a drain of 60,000 of your strongest able bodies just because they're vulnerable, right? And in quote desperate, or under I don't know, entitled judgment, um, imagine what it's doing to entire communities, right?
Absolutely.
It goes back to, even, uh, I don't mean to be overly dramatic, but even the slave trade that occurred out of Africa, the continent still recovering after these many the drain of talent, the drain of people, the drain of, of human capital, if we must say it like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not as easy. I remember a few years ago my people were called vermin, and it's not as simple as it looks. And I think my wish for most people who have had the lottery winning of being born in a stable society, in a first or second world country, don't be so quick to jump to conclusions or to buy into the narrative, right? Is the rest of the world, like we that we sit in these first world, economies. We're the minority. We're the 1%, right, worldwide. Don't quote me on the exact percentage, but you know what I mean. I'm trying to illustrate a point, right? So I think compassion, and I think, yes, discernment from the people that get caught into trying to buy a quick answer to, to
Yes.
their worries. But when you're in that state of despair, logic is not always your first, you know
Absolutely.
go to. But those of us in the receiving end, right, of this influx of immigrants, or this influx of news, or this influx of information, um, I just ask for more compassion, and don't be so quick. You don't know. You don't know what it would take for somebody to take such perilous journey for a hope of safety.
I totally agree. For me, watching those images, I was in my heart and my brain, I was really thinking that, listening to all the news and saying this is a tragedy, this is a crisis. To me, the biggest tragedy, it's not that those young men had hope for a better life as it was sold to them as an idea. To me, the biggest tragedy is that there are people who learned and organized how to profit from this
Yeah.
narrative, from this hope. And again, I want to clarify that we see in the title the price of false hope, and we are not saying that hope is not a good thing. Hope is essential. It's one of the greatest humanity strengths. If there was no hope, we wouldn't be where we are, and we wouldn't
We
have
wouldn't wake up the
anything.
next day,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
seriously.
So to me, hope is a gift, but there is a big difference between hope and wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Between active hope, hope is an active. And here, I mean, I really like, I don't know if you have read the work of Professor Shane Lopez, Making Hope Happen, where Professor Shane Lopez spent all his career on studying the science of hope. And I will butcher what he a quote from him, but he said like, hope is telling yourself tomorrow will be better or the future will be better, and I have the willpower to make it happen.
Which is
But
what we ask.
I have the willpower. I am
Yeah.
not waiting for someone to give me that power or give me that solution. That's to me the difference. It's that when hope is packaged with despair or desperation, and it reached a stage where I'm just waiting for the miraculous event, incident, or solution. I'm
I
so desperate that the moment I hear Sally explaining to me, I'm just taking your example, Sally,
mm,
what, whatever potential solution, I stop listening and I stop thinking, and just I let my emotions catch that moment and say, Sally, I want your solution, without even giving her the opportunity to. So Sally likely is an ethical practitioner, an ethical professional, would make sure that I understand what I am signing off. But not
Yeah,
everyone
well,
is like that.
Sally's a lawyer, so I was going to turn to her. I was going to turn to her right now, and I was going to say, okay, so there's, caveat emptor, right? Of course. And there is the responsibility of both parties, right? Of the buyer and the person fulfilling
right.
or facilitating. Um, but if you look at someone like Sally, right? Let's all look at Sally. Yes, she's an attorney, which it goes to show her humanity that she chooses to expand, her offering to help. And from our journey together, I know that you came about branching or expanding the scope of your practice because you saw so much vulnerability.
Yeah.
And you have some powerful skill sets. Like you're talking about NLP, you're talking about hypnosis, you're talking about, like coaching, like many things that could seriously harm someone, right? If used unethically. So,
Right.
what would you tell people, or your advice be, um, how to discern between an ethical practitioner or facilitator
Mhm.
and one that merits a second look?
I think that's an excellent question because there are a lot of, I'll say, charlatans, for lack of a better word. Um, and I think part of it is just doing some due diligence. I've been in some fabulous coaching relationships where I've been the person being coached, and then I've been some that were terrible, and I was the person who was being coached. And a lot of it has to do with what you're wanting to accomplish. Are you looking for miracles, quick fixes? Those people are probably not going to be serving your best interest if that's what they're promising you. And we want that hope, right? We want the quick fix, we want the miracle. And it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. I strongly believe in all that. However, when you're talking with someone, if they have a process and a procedure and they're honest to say it's going to be hard work, it's not going to be easy, it's a very difficult path that you're choosing, I think they're being honest with you, and I think that person deserves the second look.
Yes.
Yeah. And, back to my social media and digital, footprint obsession, success leaves traces, right? When you're considering placing your hope into in one of our former mentor expert, well, she's still an alumni, but you know what I mean. She always used to say, do not confuse charisma for competence. And it's so easy to have happy ears and to, you want to lose weight, or you want to, find love, you want to, like, find safety, you want something that's better for your children, right? And um and it's so easy to have happy ears and to believe that, you know you're going to get there in 20 minutes, right? When people who have truly succeeded, and I'm addicted to biographies, right, of successful people. or people who have achieved success. I shouldn't say successful people. People who have achieved some measurable in quantitative success is that they will tell you the struggle. The struggle is real, and the cost of it is real, and the pain of it is real. But the benefit has to be, greater than all of that, right? And we were speaking in our prior series about the post traumatic growth
Growth.
that we experience when we go through a negative occurrence, right? So most of the people that have succeeded have had those dire circumstances and those mega expensive lessons that they have learned, that anybody trying to circumvent that is not going to build the character that is needed to sustain it, right? Or to achieve it, or to do the work. And sometimes when you're working with the done for you, which I'm not, you guys know, we've been collaborating for a long time, that I really like the done with you, because there's an understanding, appreciation, and accountability from the client for them to understand
Yeah.
what it takes, right? Opposite to, I can write your book for you. I can do, I can create between me and AI, we can go to town with your brand, right? But it's not you, and it's the same with all of these. That's not to say that desperation
Yes.
to walk from, Honduras to the US by foot, and it's not real, because it's real, right? Just like crossing, from Cuba to Florida, or from Morocco to Spain. Like, we're not speaking about the same thing. We're speaking about people that there's just they're not seeing a way forward. They are not seeing a way forward. And I see it with my people, the vermin, um, the people that you meet that have left Latin America, right? Not all, but the majority are not your elite. They're not your doctors. They're not your lawyers. They're not your, those people are okay. They're living, in a less than perfect system, but they're okay. You often meet those that they've gambled it all, right, to come for a better place. So I think I just ask, and I guess the three of us can have an ask. My ask is for compassion. Unless you walk that journey yourself, just have a bit more of an open heart to anybody that makes decisions that seem illogical to you, but really they're the most logical thing for those that suffer. Sally, what would be your ask of our audience and friends?
Yeah, I would echo your sentiments. I think what we're seeing is a perfectly rational decision from people in that circumstance.
Yeah,
It may seem irrational to us, and yet from that position, it makes total sense. And so we need to understand that.
yeah. And Yusuf, you can close our segment for us today.
Yeah, for me, I want just to clarify first that we all need hope. It's essential. And we all naturally place our hope in people, in careers, in businesses, in governments, in faith figures. But the question is not whether we hope or no, but the question is how to protect our hope,
Yeah,
and with discernment, with wise judgment. And also it's how our hope will expand our freedom, our agency, and leading us to a better future rather than surrender it to someone else. Because at the end, what I see is that when people become more vulnerable to exploitation, It's when they are uncomfortable with uncertainty and
Mm,
someone is selling them a manufactured certainty.
mm.
This is where discernment and judgment become really important.
Brilliantly said.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. It's a bit of a tough topic, but it is our reality as well. So thank you, Yusuf, and thank you, Sally, for
Thank
walking
you.
us through such difficult realities. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Until
Thank you.
next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.